Hello, it's Rafael Gutierrez today, and I actually am going to talk about something that I found is errors in a lot of martial arts, and I hope you'll stick by it. But before I do, I actually wanted to tell you guys something that I have known for a while, but recently I started looking at the numbers. And that is something that most people forget: the demographics of a typical martial artist. Now, interesting thing is, every publisher, every TV channel is looking for, well, what demographics does this go into? And a lot of times when they do look at stuff like martial arts, they usually go for the little kids or people with a really low level of education. Now, when I say education, I don't mean necessarily that they don't have doctorate. I mean the level of understanding is really low. What's really interesting is when you actually look at the demographics, you end up finding a different picture. Now, I actually was looking at martial arts in general, and in the U.S. and around, and it was interesting to find some of the numbers. The number that I found most interesting was from the World Karate Federation, which ended up saying that there were over 100 million karate practitioners in the world. Now, that only actually included the ones that people will sometimes refer to as the Tokyo Karates, the Shotokan, the Goju-Ryu from the Tokyo lineages, the Shito-Ryu from Tokyo lineages, and it didn't necessarily look at the karates from Okinawa. So you're talking about over 100 million people worldwide, which is a big number if you think about it. Now, the other interesting thing that I found is, as I looked at this, it actually ended up saying that most of the people who were involved in martial arts tended to be, actually about more than half of the people who were involved in martial arts were over the age of 18 and had disposable income. Upper and middle class is what you're talking about. And I started thinking the interesting thing is, so you have someone over 18 with disposable income. You're talking about someone who probably has a high level of education. Now, I will say it's one of the things that I've noticed over and over again is a lot of people who I've met in martial arts, they may not necessarily have a high degree, but they have a really high level of understanding in when it comes to physics and biology. It's for some reason something that they tend to look at in it, and it tends to actually drive the art a certain way. Sadly, though, most news medias and everything would rather go into someone who claims to do mysticism or no-touch knockouts than actually look at real martial arts, which is what most people who are in martial arts really want to look for. And I actually did think that it was really interesting. And you can see it with shows. I mean, most shows in martial arts are the sensational, this guy builds up his chi and does this. Now, I'm not going to say that, but there's ways you can actually determine what's going on, which is a little more academic than just saying, well, it's magic properties or spirituality, which I'm not taking anything away from spirituality. It's just when you're actually dealing with certain things, for me, and it seems that for most martial artists, they really do want to know the real facts of what's going on rather than, well, it's just, spiritual energy. Most of the laymen actually go for spiritual energy, not true martial artists. Now, if you actually look at MMA, again, you're dealing with usually men who are upper middle class who are actually getting involved in this, or men who have high levels of education. You look at most of these people who are in MMA, most of the people who become greats, most of them actually do have college under their belt, which is something that people forget, especially when they look at media. They see two people fighting and they think, oh, well, they must be low level of education, rather than seeing these are people who are trained athletes. A lot of them are actually going out of their way to actually find reality. And part of the problem is a lot of us don't really understand how things work, and there's things that we actually know, but we don't know how to explain. For instance, what I did want to talk about today is the definition of power. Not power as in, oh, I'm a powerful guy, not me necessarily, but someone, but rather power as in the physics definition of power. I'm not a physicist, but we can talk about that. I do tend to deal with physics when I do kinesiology because it is important, and power as well. Now, what I've noticed most places do most of these scientific martial arts shows, and I use quotes really loosely because some of these places should have known better, but they didn't. They, instead of looking at power, they look at force. Now, force is related to power, but it's not power. just to give you a hint, force is this. It's the ability for something to move something else. Usually it's mass times the acceleration. So if you take that pretty much equation, mass times acceleration would be, if you have a car, let's say a 2,000-pound car moving at half a mile per hour, that would have a lot of force. It has a big mass. It has a small amount of acceleration, going from 0 to 0.5 miles per hour. That has a lot of force. It has a big acceleration. It has an acceleration. It has weight. Now let's take a baseball going from 0 to 90 miles per hour. You have a larger acceleration, and you have roughly probably about the same amount of force. But if you think about it, if you get hit by a 2,000-pound car moving at 0.5 miles per hour, and there's nothing behind you or holding you still, as this thing hits you, it would just pretty much move you. It probably would decrease. It would decrease its acceleration if it's the same, everything being the same. But it pretty much wouldn't do much damage to you. Now let's take a fastball going at 90 miles per hour. We're talking about a baseball, a lot less, but it's going a lot faster. Now when this hits, one of the things that does happen is you have a different type of collision. If you think about it, you get hit by a 2,000-pound car going half a mile per hour, it's going to hit you, and you're just going to be kind of part of the mass of the car now. Then you're going to continue moving. You get hit by a baseball, the ball completely deaccelerates, hits you, falls down. Now that change in acceleration, going from 90 miles per hour to 0, that energy, all that energy that was there has to go somewhere. And this is actually where power is different. You may have the same force, but how fast that power is going to, how fast that is being transferred is going to make a big difference. You think about it, if a fastball hits you going 90 miles per hour, you're probably not going to move, but if it hits you, let's say, in the face, you're probably going to get a lot of fractures. Energy is lost through there instead of moving you. If you get hit by a car going half a mile per hour, they'll probably just move you and push you along. Same force, but the power is different. In the case of a baseball, you actually have that force being applied really quick. Now, one of the things you learn if you do Makiwara is you realize that the thing that really gives you the collision, the thing that really gives you the power going into it, is how fast that force gets changed in that time that the collision takes place. Most people will say that when you're dealing with damage, you're dealing with the 0.1 second of the collision. Now, again, if you think about it, 90 mile per hour fastball, how much of that force is going into you in 0.1 seconds? And the answer is a lot of it, most of it. And a smart car, a 2,000-pound car hitting you at half a mile per hour, the force, it may actually be longer. You may actually develop more force, but the time in which it is actually being transferred into your body is longer, so it tends to do less damage. Yes, what does damage, force is part of it, but it has to be applied in a fast amount of time. If not, what you do is you push. And I actually will say, when I teach martial arts at community college, I do have nice bags, and a lot of people punch the bag, and they don't punch. They think they're punching the bag, but what they're doing is they're pushing the bag, and so they get these nice big swings in the bag, but there's no deformity in the bag. The reason is they're not getting power into it, they're just getting force. So remember, power. What's going to cause damage is the force divided by how much time that force takes to be transferred. As soon as you start moving, we now actually have to change the calculation. That's why if you look at people punch Makiwara, they push as hard as they can. Yes, they might be putting a lot of force and they're moving it, but they're not getting the power they need to cause damage. That's, by the way, another thing that's interesting. If you look at a lot of the Chinese styles, a lot of the ones I've seen, you notice they hit, their arms just kind of whip out. What ends up happening is they transfer the force. It actually ends up converting in mass times acceleration has to be equal to mass times acceleration. So as the mass of your arm is less than the mass of your entire body, you end up developing the same amount of force, but it's going to be applied to a smaller mass, so the acceleration comes in. If the acceleration comes up, that means you end up having more power than you would if you had more mass. It's just going to be sent into the area quicker. Now, a lot of people will say, well, that's not the way what I believe, but the problem is this: it has to work with physics, and physics tells us that we cannot actually can't destroy the energy. Things have to actually even out. The force in one area has to equal the force on the other. If not, you have some sort of deformity, which is fine, and that's actually, by the way, why we wear gloves, to expand the amount of time it takes a force to actually go in there. So, one of the interesting things is if you watch a lot of the martial art videos that people have done trying to make the science, they always are measuring the force that someone puts into a punch, rather than looking at the power. What the reason is, the force gives you these big numbers, but if someone's pushing in, the amount of damage won't necessarily be that much. The other thing with power is it tends to actually deal more with technique than with raw body mass. In force, the bigger you are, you can actually add more force because you're just adding your weight to it. When you're dealing with power, it's how fast that force is applied. Now, I hope this made sense to people, and if not, please ask the questions. If it does, please share with your friends and consider subscribing. We're actually at just over 300, and I think this actually does something that it proves my point where I'm not someone who is promoting this like crazy with sponsors and everything. The few people who have been sponsors have technically just haven't given me money. They've just subscribed. Some people have sent me products to review, which what's nice is all the products that I've been sent have been actually really good, and so I have actually mentioned them. And my book sales. I have Serious on the Rarest Things and Off the Rails, which are pretty much martial art adventures, a novel for Serious on the Rarest Things, especially if you know Okinawan Karate and you want to know something about Okinawa. I try to make a novelized version of it. It's available on Amazon. Off the Rails is I pretty much explored the coast of California by train and stopped and trained with other people. If it's something that's interesting, you do consider going to Amazon. It's up. My author's name is R.H. Gutierrez, MD. Yes, I do have an MD. And that's actually the way you can actually support this channel if you want. Buy the books, and if you like them, make a comment. And ask questions. Any questions you ask, I will answer, and I will get to eventually if I haven't already. There are things as you notice, I will do, which are anything science related. I won't necessarily go directly into techniques, mostly because of there's a lot of great people who are doing that already, and so I figure why do the same thing that some people are already doing a great job at. I hope you enjoyed this video, and have a nice day. Goodbye.